Hello, everyone. So, in our lives, sometimes we go from feeling like we have completely figured life out to feeling like, we have messed everything up. Sometimes that happens in the same day, sometimes in the same hour. One moment, everything feels so clear, so easy. You feel confident, grounded, like you finally understand what you're doing. And then suddenly it's like the floor drops out. You start replaying your conversations, you start doubting your decisions, you start questioning yourself. And the scary part is how convincing these doubts sound sometimes. If you slow down for a moment and really look at what's happening during those swings, something becomes very obvious. There is a voice in your head that constantly talking. Sometimes that voice is supportive, sometimes it's critical, sometimes it sounds smart and analytical, sometimes it sounds absolutely certain about what you should have done differently. It comments, it compares, it predicts, it judges sometimes. And without really checking, most of us just assume that this voice is me, right? But if you actually listen closely, that assumption starts to fall apart. And that's where the power of witness, that's where the power of listening, that's where the power of observation of your own thoughts come into play. Because if you observe closely, that voice isn't stable. It doesn't speak from one consistent place. Its tone changes, its opinions change, its confidence changes. One moment, the voice in your head, it's very calm and logical. The next moment, it's dramatic and extreme. Sometimes it even argues with itself, offering one explanation and then immediately attacking it with another. So a natural question comes up: if this voice is me, and then which version exactly? Which version of that voice is me exactly? And maybe an even more important question: who is the one noticing all of this? Let's try something simple. Let's say don't try to change anything. Just notice the next thought that appears. You don't have to look for it. It will show up on its own. And when it does, notice this. You didn't plan it. You didn't plan that thought. You didn't choose the words of that thought. You didn't build that thought step by step. And that's very, very important. I repeat this because this is the most important part of this talk. That just notice the next thought that appears in your head. And when it does, notice it very, very carefully. Did you plan that thought? No. Did you choose the words of that thought? No. Did you build that thought step by step? Probably no. It just appeared and then finished. By the time you were aware of it, it was already there. So if thoughts are just showing up like that, without your permission, without your control, then who is actually talking? And who is listening? At first, it feels like there must be two things going on: a talker and a listener. But when you actually look for the listener, you don't find anything solid out there. You don't find a center. You don't find a separate someone receiving the thoughts or listening the thoughts. There is just awareness of thinking happening. In the same way, there is seeing without a visible seer. There is thinking without a thinker you can point to. What you do, you keep finding are more thoughts claiming ownership. Example, I am thinking, I need to understand this, I should figure this out. But those are thoughts too. And that's precisely the illusion, that you think that you are thinking. But in reality, thoughts come to you. But then there is this separate sense of self, or the false sense of self, that illusory self that claims the ownership of those thoughts and say, okay, I am thinking, I figured it out, I need to understand this, I should be doing like this. So But those are also thoughts that you are aware of, that someone is aware of. Who is that someone? Those thoughts are not outside the process, they are part of it. It's like trying to find the author of a novel by only looking at the characters inside the story. And here's where something important clicks if you really are observant about all these things. What feels like many voices isn't actually many cells. It's one system moving very fast, and that gives the illusion of separate thoughts claimed by you. One system generating commentary, reactions, corrections, and evaluations, all in very rapid succession. It feels divided, but it isn't. It's just quick. So quick that it creates the illusion of depth, layers, and an inner world full of different characters with strong opinions. But notice this, none of these characters stay. They rotate, they contradict each other, they disappear often within seconds. And when you really see this, not as an idea, but as a direct experience, something relaxes. Because anything that comes and goes this fast can't be what you are. What you are doesn't swing from genius to loser. It doesn't vanish when confidence drops. It doesn't show up only when the right thought appears. There is something quietly present before the voice starts, while it's running, and after it fades. Nothing dramatic, nothing mystical, just obvious. And that presence doesn't need to silence the mind. It doesn't need to control thoughts or replace them with better ones. It just notices, it just witnesses. And that noticing changes everything. The voice can keep talking, but it loses its authority. It feels lighter, less convincing, sometimes even a little funny. Not because it's wrong, but because it's seen for what it is, a stream of interpretations, not reality itself. This is where real freedom begins. Not freedom from thoughts, but freedom from being mistaken for them. If you stay with this long enough, you start noticing something else. Thoughts aren't random, they follow patterns. And those patterns come from how this body and brain were shaped over time. Family, culture, school, praise, rejection, stress, safety, maybe lack of safety. All of it leaves marks. Once those patterns are there, thoughts tend to run along the same tracks again and again. Not because something is wrong, not because there is a hidden problem. That's just how learning works. The same reactions show up in different situations. One person criticizes you, another disagrees, another ignores you. And internally, it's the same story every time. They don't appreciate me. But who exactly is that me? Which version is offended right now? Same thing with success. Different achievements, same rush, same fear of losing it. Different faces, same inner script. When you see this, the voice stops feeling personal and starts looking mechanical. This is where journaling can help. Not to fix anything, but just to see the repetition clearly. Over time, it becomes obvious. The same interpretations, the same emotional arcs, the same conclusions just dressed up in new words. And there is a relief in seeing that, because if it keeps repeating like this, it can't be the core of who you are. It's conditioning playing itself out. And there is nothing evil about it. No inner enemy, no self-sabotage. There is actually a lot of innocence in it, on the contrary. This system learned what it learned because it had to survive and make sense of the world. That's not failure. That's intelligence doing its best with what it had. The problem only starts, when those stories are taken as a reality itself. That's where the real problem starts. That's where the real suffering starts, so to say. Once you see that, you don't need to fight thoughts anymore. You don't need to suppress them or replace them. You just recognize them as commentary, not commands. Now notice something even simpler. You don't actually know how a thought is created. You can talk about neurons and chemistry, but in direct experience, you don't know how the next thought forms. You don't build it. You don't choose it. You don't send it out. It just appears and then it's gone. So if you don't create thoughts, can't predict them, and don't control them, how could that voice be you? That question quietly loosens identification all by itself. I mean, the identification of you as your thoughts. You realize the me you have been defending is actually an interpretation machine. Useful, practical, but not an identity. And the key thing is this: you don't need to understand how it works. Trying to figure it out is just another thought pattern doing what it does best. The shift happens when you notice that you don't know, and yet life still functions. Thoughts still arise, actions still happen. So instead of asking why I am like this, you start noticing this is how this system works. This is how this body mind mechanism works. No judgment, just observation. Pure, pristine witness, pure observation. And in that observation, space appears. Because what you are doesn't need to explain itself to exist. It's simply the open field in which all of this is happening. Thoughts, patterns, confidence, doubt. And once this is seen, something very practical changes in daily life. The voice still talks, but it doesn't run the show. You hear a familiar story start up, and instead of being pulled in, there is a pause. Sometimes even a soft smile, not mocking, just recognition. And that non interference is what loosens the grip of illusion. This loosens the grip of what is called Maya. We are not trying to get rid of the voice, we are just seeing it clearly. And whatever repeats and learns cannot be what you are, because you are here noticing the repetition. That noticing doesn't come and go, it doesn't need validation, it doesn't swing between extremes. It's already there, it's already here, before the story starts and after it ends. And when that's seen, something relaxes. You stop trying to be the answer. I hope that it helps. Thank you so much.